Welcome to Faith Fondue, a podcast featuring author and speaker Haley DeMaria and teacher and blogger Ann Strickers. Faith Fondue will feature a melting pot of topics, ignited by a flame, our faith, and guided by the Holy Spirit. It is the week of July 4th. We are wrapping up a long holiday weekend. It is also the 14th week in Ordinary Time. And good morning, Ann, or good afternoon, whenever you are listening to this. How are you?
Hi, Haley. Good to be with you, and hi to our listeners. This week, we will talk a little bit about fireworks. We're going to talk about the Olympics and Olympic trivia. Let's just touch on the NBA Finals. And in our spiritual stew, we'll be talking about, Haley's been focusing on the saints, so maybe something from St. Thomas, the Apostle, and we'll continue our theme of talents. So tell me, Haley, we're recording today on July 5th. We usually record on Sundays, but yesterday was today is the national holiday observed. Yesterday was Independence Day, the 4th of July, which is actually my favorite holiday. And I'm anxious to hear, how was your 4th of July?
It was great. It was, it's our country's independence, which of course is super complicated when you really get into it, as history majors. What that all means. But it was significant to us for a couple of reasons. One, we are pretty well vaccinated here in Maryland. Of course, my whole family is. So it seemed like the first real holiday and celebration we have had since the pandemic started. Everything seemed perfectly back to normal, which I know we don't really want to go back to normal, but in terms of celebrating and holidays, it did. We had a gathering with some friends on Saturday, and none of us were worried, are there too many people here? Is this a bad idea? You don't kind of have that guilt looming over you or just that fear looming over you. So that was, really fun. We watched fireworks last night, and, again, you can just be, even though we're outside, and even I think by this time last year being outside was, we felt relatively safe, although you still worried about crowds. It was just nice to see the fireworks again. I felt like Annapolis put on two different shows. We had, kind of the fireworks and then what everyone would consider the finale. And then they kind of started up again. So we were all joking, oh, they did 2020 fireworks and then they did 2021's fireworks. Yeah. But it felt like a celebration of, okay, we are really moving, in what I would consider the right direction in terms of being over, or at least moving through the pandemic. But it was also, an interesting holiday for Jamie and me because, we're celebrating independence, and we now have these very independent two teenage boys who were not here. So, of course, Edward, I've mentioned before, is down in North Carolina working as a camp counselor. So he was not home. And James was with us on Saturday, but then left for the beach on the morning of the 4th, and he was gone. So it was just Jamie and I. So we're sort of celebrating the independence of our kids, which was, after 18 years of celebrating with holidays, it's different. No better, no worse, just, kind of different and fun. So it was nice, but, I'd love to hear why this is your favorite holiday, what makes it so, and what did you do, Ann?
Yeah, well, I don't know, a couple of years, maybe 10, 15 years ago, I just love, first of all, red, white, and blue, and the middle of summer. I think, part of being a teacher is just not having to work in the summer. And this just gives people a reason to be together, be outside, which I love, to swim. And, maybe it just doesn't have the same expectations that some of our other holidays carry, or, anxiety about it. It's just kind of like a bonus holiday. And where my parents live, I grew up in Walnut Creek, but this town they live in, Danville, has like an awesome 4th of July parade. And I've gone for many years. I've taken my nieces in recent years. They come in from Washington, D.C. and meet up with another friend and her family. And there's like city ordinance. You can't put your chairs out until a certain time the night before. And it just feels like small town America. And you see people, and that's part of it. So Unfortunately, it was canceled for this year. They're going to actually do it at Labor Day, but I still went down to downtown Danville with a friend. We walked on the main street. A really good Independence Day is me then having pancakes for breakfast and then having some sort of barbecue in the evening. I've spent some Fourth of July's in some pretty awesome places, like, in our nation's capital, obviously having lived there, or Huntington Beach, California has the oldest Fourth of July parade west of the Mississippi.
Huh.
And I have to tell you, I mean, and they had a 5K in the morning, again, which I love to start the day with like an exercise. Then we watched the parade, and all of these homes, they must have been like cottages or bungalows, maybe for people a little more inland who had like a summer place on the beach. And it's like Christmas, like people full on decorate, and it's just funny to see what people are going to wear. I wear this golf skirt and it's the Constitution. It's like red, white, and blue. Some flag stuff can be pretty tacky. This one is, I'd like to think it's not tacky. I don't know if I should be wearing the Constitution, but it's a fun skirt. I wear it honestly like every year. So, it's just fun to see how Americans decide to engage and celebrate,
Yeah, it's interesting when you first started talking about this holiday. It's one of the, first of all, it's a major holiday, right? We
Yeah,
would
I was
not
going to say,
classify.
can we clarify that?
Yeah, we would not mention that we would not classify this as a B-list holiday, as we discussed earlier in our podcast. But it is, it's not there. There really is no religious origins to it. So many of the other holidays that we talk about, there's the big ones, obviously, Christmas and Easter. And then even when we were talking about, oh gosh, now I can't remember what they were. Some of them even started as religious pagan holidays and
Oh,
stemmed
right,
towards it.
Mardi Gras.
Right,
Or
Mardi
no,
Gras.
Mardi Gras has religious roots,
Right, but
but
the 4th of July does not, right? In fact, we're
yes,
celebrating our independence from, you know, a religious nation, and celebrating freedom of religion. But it also hasn't become, therefore, it is not a religious holiday that turned very commercial, like
yeah,
Christmas, like
yeah, true.
Easter. It is just truly a holiday to celebrate each other, our
Yep,
country, anything, whatever we love in our
yep,
live by about living here, that's what we're
yeah,
celebrating. So
yeah,
it's kind of fun in that sense.
yeah. Now, I've been out of the country on the 4th of July. I was on an immersion in Mexico, and I think I was on immersion in El Salvador. And I had said the second time, I'm like, I'm not doing this again because like I said, I love the 4th of July. And for me to miss that, and it might be just, again, a rite of passage of summer, a turning point. And one of the women I worked with was not upset at all to miss the 4th of July
Hmm.
because she was not, she just struggled with some of the complexities of our country. And I was just like, okay, I need to keep you at an arm's length because this is my day. And I truly believe we have to celebrate. We have to be able to celebrate some things in life. Yes, we can reconcile, own our misgiving, our faults, all of those things. We must do those things. And we must celebrate. If we can't reflect and like appreciate what it means to be an American, then I don't know that we can or should do those other things as well, because we do have certain freedoms. We do have so many opportunities. I remember even just living in DC and being on the mall, and I would look around and there were people that clearly had just moved to this country and they were celebrating, and no one's saying don't. It's totally inclusive in that way. In terms of what if you want watermelon or just water balloons or whatever you're doing, fireworks are free for all. So enjoy, come one, come all. Yeah, America. God bless America, right? I mean, we need
Yes.
it.
Yeah, no, exactly. And there is such a feeling of patriotism also, at this time of year as we're watching different Olympic trial events, and moving towards the Olympics. I don't know if you watched any of the track and field, or of course, I was watching the swimming Olympic trials. They ended, a little over a week ago. It's been fun to see the different Notre Dame Olympians who have made the team this year.
Huh.
And even a few, I know
Oops.
there's a swimmer who'll be a sophomore this year. He's actually from the Annapolis area. He made the Olympic team from Panama. That's
Yes, I
something,
saw that.
yeah, to
Okay.
celebrate too. But I like many people. I don't know if I can say most people. I'd like to think so. Are a huge fan of the Olympics. There's so many sports that I tend to only follow and watch during the Olympics. Like many people do swimming. I happen to follow swimming all the time, but I know, many people only follow swimming during the Olympic years. But I agree. If we can't come together and be proud to represent our country or celebrate our country, that's a tough day for somebody if they can't do that.
Yeah. Or just a missed opportunity, I mean,
Right.
I really think we can live with both. And I want to encourage us to try that. But yeah, in terms of the Olympics, so I was in Santa Cruz for the 4th of July. Santa Cruz from the Bay Area is not far at all. It's great. There's a beach boardwalk there. This boardwalk is over 100 years old. And it really is a slice of American life. Anytime you go to a boardwalk, you see families, truly true diversity of age and, different types of people. You get it all. We were on the beach. We had s'mores last night. There's fireworks over the beach and whatnot. But there was a group of us at a house, and I happened to bring this magazine that had a crossword puzzle, and it was all about the Olympics. And I have found that crossword puzzles can be a great way. This might be a tip or a takeaway for our listeners. Bring a crossword puzzle when you're a guest, because sometimes when you're a guest, you're kind of sitting around, they might be like cleaning up the kitchen and don't want your help, or other people are cleaning. And at some point it's just too much, you know what I mean, to step in. And so I started this crossword puzzle, and I would ask people the questions, and it was really fun. Like, there are 205 of these in the 2021 Olympics. And we really struggled. I had to look it
I
up.
know, but can you give us a hint with how many letters?
Yeah, it begins with a C.
Oh, not countries, is it?
It is. It is countries.
Ah,
So I didn't have the C, but very good. Yes. And the 2024 Olympic Games will be held in,
Noel, I know 2028 is LA.
yes, correct.
2024 is in Europe somewhere.
It is.
Paris?
Yeah, way to go. Oh
Ah,
my gosh, I
okay.
need you for my
You
crossword.
did.
And then originally, what did Olympians wear around their neck?
When they won or just when they
Yeah, when
competed?
they won, the winners.
Well, it wasn't those olive branches, was
It
it?
was,
Oh
yeah,
my
the
gosh.
olive
Okay.
branch.
Yeah, the
Yeah,
olive
yeah,
wreath.
you're hired. Very good, very
Ha!
good.
Oh, that's
So
fun. I might have to, maybe I'll look online and see if I can find that. I would
yeah,
enjoy that. I'm not a crossword puzzle. I'm more of a Sudoku. I'm better with numbers than I am with
okay,
words.
okay,
But maybe I
yeah.
could do an Olympic one.
And it's just funny what people know. The most decorated I just gave it. The most decorated Olympian of all time
Well, I do
is,
know that, of course, Michael
yeah,
Phelps. Yes.
correct. Yes. Um, but yeah, it's just a fun way to put it out there, and people are very passionate about the Olympics. And I was surprised because I had two friends over for dinner this week, and they were like, "Can you believe we're holding the Olympics?" And they were, I don't want to say skeptical, but they were not on board with it entirely. And I had just happened to listen to a podcast from the New York Times, The Daily, about the Olympics in Tokyo. And, Japan has a very low vaccination rate. It's like 7% of its people, but they were able to contain COVID fairly well. But all these athletes coming in from different countries, and, there's going to be no fans. So they were talking about like what the experience will be like. And someone said, well, can't they bring, I said, different things like they can, Coco Gauff, the tennis player, she can bring her parents because she's under 18. So I thought that was interesting. So if you're under 18,
Ah.
you can bring a guest, but everybody else is on their own. So they were not necessarily, I don't know, they didn't out and out say they didn't think they should have the Olympics, but I'd love to hear your thought. on whether we should have, what's your thought if somebody was to ask you,
I,
should we have these games, knowing this vaccination rate,
uh,
knowing what, the variant on these people coming in?
yeah, I mean, my first thought and question to you, of course, is are they athletes, right? Are the people who are skeptical about holding, the Olympics at all, are they athletes? I'm going to guess no, or at least not at a certain level. I just think, and I was nowhere near, at a point where I was, going to the Olympics, especially during my college career. But when you participate in an Olympic sport and you play at a certain level, there there is an understanding of what it takes to make an Olympic team and to compete at the Olympic level. And it's extraordinary what it takes for athletes to be able to do that. And I really just know swimming. So,
Very.
for unless you are Michael Phelps, Katie Ledecky, back in our age, Janet Evans, growing up, there are of course the exceptions, but for most of the swimmers who make the Olympic team, they've got one shot at this, and not only do they have one shot at it, but they've got one shot to be at the peak of their career, at the height of their taper, right
Yeah.
on their event that day, that race to make the team. And it is literally hundredths of a second that can prevent you from either making or not making the team. I mean, it is extraordinary. The very, very, very small window and opportunity that the most elite swimmers even have to make the Olympic team. So to take that opportunity away from someone is, to me as an athlete, would be devastating. I mean, they've worked
Mm.
their entire athletic careers for this. So
Yeah.
even if we had held the Olympics last year, the Olympic swim team for the United States would have been different last year than it is this year, because you would have had swimmers who hit the height of their swimming career at a different time. And that's
Yeah.
really unfortunate for those athletes. Now we'll never know, of course, who would have made it last year,
Yeah.
but I can guarantee you it would not have been the same team that we have this year. And
Yeah.
and that, that's really going to not sit well with some of the swimmers, not in a negative way, but just in a gosh, what could have been. Maybe that
Yeah.
swimmer that got third place by a hundredth of a second that didn't make the team this year, maybe they would have made it last year. So for me, I am all about playing.
Yeah.
And we just, we looked this up. There are the modern Olympic Games, have only been canceled 3 times, and it was for World War I and then twice during World War II. So, the pandemic now thankfully didn't cancel these games; it just
Yeah.
postponed them. And I'm really, really grateful for that, because really,
Yeah.
again, in Olympic sport, there's
Yeah.
nothing greater than the
Yeah.
Olympic Games. It's why we all watch. It's why we all watch
Right.
sports that we don't ever watch, any other time, because they're so
Yeah.
exciting.
You know, yeah, I so value your perspective on that. And, not just for those athletes who are trying to qualify for the first time, but also for like, I don't know, a historical perspective, like somebody like Simone Biles, like if she wants to be considered, and maybe she doesn't need it, but to be considered one of the greatest, like, part of
Exactly.
how we look at athletes in history is what they were able to do throughout their career. You mentioned Michael Phelps. So for her, like, I don't know if she was too young the first time or didn't qualify, but, like, in terms of making her mark historically, it is important that she compete again. I think she's 24 now. So, in terms of age, there's
Right.
something, that's important. I guess what's interesting is that the people of Japan are not, it's like 10% of the people want the games,
So that's an interesting statistic.
right?
I do think, just to go back to your point about the Olympics, and you mentioned Simone Biles, and I think that's a great example. Again, I go back to swimming because it's the sport that I know the best, and I think this is probably true with track and field athletes, probably most athletes in certain sports. I mean, you could be a world record holder in, I'm going to pick an event, let's say the 200 fly, which means you are the fastest swimmer in the history of the sport who has ever swum that event. You are the fastest in that event. If you don't make the Olympic team, let's say you broke that record in 2017 at the World Championships. I guarantee you most people have never heard of that person. You have to win an Olympic gold medal to
Yep.
really have a name for yourself or
Yeah.
be considered one of the greats. Forget the fact that you have the world record and you are the best in that event ever. for some reason, if you don't have that Olympic medal, it
Yeah.
just takes something away. And I don't know
Yeah.
why that is, but that's just how it is. In
Yeah.
certainly in
Yep.
swimming, I'm going to guess for track and field, some of those kind of individual team event sports.
Sure. Yeah.
Same with gymnastics, right? Simone Biles, she doesn't make an Olympic team, but she has, 10 gymnastics world championships. Sure, the
Yeah.
gymnastics world's going to know who she is, but if she's not
Yeah.
on those
Right.
Olympic teams, nobody else does.
Yeah. Well, two responses to that right away with the NCAA, change in ruling about being able to use your image and likeness. For example, for some of those sports, say those
Mm-hmm.
athletes are at Stanford or UCLA or wherever they're swimming, they can then, generate an income based on, they can still stay amateur. They will have to follow the rules, right? In terms of how they, I mean, Stanford has an obscene number of athletes in the Olympics every year. It's crazy.
Yeah, it's interesting. I was just reading. So this is, and this actually should be a great topic for us one time because it's super complicated and multifaceted.
Yeah.
But I was reading an article about a gymnast at LSU who has the most Instagram followers than any other collegiate athlete. And yeah, I mean, they're estimating she could make $2-3 million based on her, just her social media following. Of course,
Yes.
this is
Right.
somebody I have never heard of, and she's not
Yeah.
even on the Olympic team because I had to
Right.
look her up for that too. But anyway, it's so there is something about the Olympics, whether it's the prestige, whether it's the kind of the Americans version of the World Cup where the entire country watches, right?
Yeah.
I think, I was actually talking to my son about the, soccer in the Olympics, and, soccer in the Olympics is a big deal to us, but to the rest of the world, it's not, right? They send like their, I don't even, well, I'll call it the B team, even though that's not, what it's called, but they send their like 21U team or 22U team or something like that. So anyway, there's something about the prestige of the Olympics that just gives you that credibility as a world-class athlete, even if you are, you kind of have to have that Olympic title next to you.
Yeah.
But it
I
is
agree.
interesting to know that, I didn't know that Japan does not want people there.
I thought it was interesting too,
Yeah, I'll have
because
to read
they
up on
are
that.
such a sports loving country.
Sure.
And my response, well, first of all, I think it's really interesting why their vaccination, it's actually worth listening to. I'll share the podcast because the story behind their vaccination rate, it's really about the culture and like not trusting something from outside. So they had to kind of convince people that they had to run clinical trials in the country for an extended period of time. And then, since they didn't come up with the vaccine, there's some distrust of like these pharmaceutical companies. So kind of that's why these clinical trials were going longer. And December is kind of the date by which they've been told, okay, we're going to have more of a rollout. But I would offer, to the people of Japan, the experience of, and this could be also not just Americans' point of view, here in this country, we had a bubble for the NBA. We had it. It worked really well. I mean, we've done this in the Bundesliga in Germany. I mean, they were the first. It's not perfect, but by and large, it works. Even MLB, the men that got COVID, it's literally because they did not follow the protocols. For example, one of the players like didn't follow the bubble rules and like spent the night with his girlfriend somewhere else and like didn't follow curfew. So it's like, again, these are people who are making the wrong choices. But if we make the right choices, which we are informed about, we can be safe. And, even the athletes' experience will be very different. There won't be fans. Their families won't be there. Like I said, unless they're under 18. One legislation that was just passed is they will allow nursing mothers to bring their child. They weren't even going to allow that. So it is going to be very strict.
But they're competing, but they'll get the experience.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Right.
And I would imagine that any Olympic athlete who has the opportunity to compete will take the restrictions, of course, wish it was a different situation, but just be so grateful to play. And I will do some more reading, and that is interesting about Tokyo or just Japan in general. But you mentioned the NBA, and of course we are heading into the NBA finals. There is great Notre Dame representation on both teams. Of course, you have Monty Williams, who is the coach of the Phoenix Suns. That is my hometown team. I have been a Suns fan my entire life. I, of course, remember, the 93 series when they played in the finals against the Bulls. It was real. I mean, I remember that. I also really enjoyed watching kind of the Bulls view of it, when we watched, the Michael Jordan
Sure. Yeah.
documentary. It was kind of fun to see that side of it and then watch it with my family and kind of explain our side of it. Being in Phoenix, there was certainly Suns mania back in 93. I'm sure there is in Phoenix right now.
Yeah.
I'm a big fan of Monty Williams. He,
Yeah.
we
Yeah.
overlapped a little bit at Notre Dame, and I knew John McLeod was the head coach, basketball coach then. He's a Phoenix
Yeah.
guy.
Yeah.
He's
Cool.
someone we knew just personally outside
Yeah.
of sports.
Yeah.
So, got to not know him well at all, but, meet Monty Williams when I was there. So I'm a big fan of his and would love, of course, the Suns to win. But I'm also a big fan of Pat Connaughton, and I wouldn't be disappointed to see them win either. My question is, and this will be my my takeaway. I am curious to know if Notre Dame has ever had an NBA champion.
Oh, I would think so with what's his name? Bill Lambier, right?
Oh,
Yeah, Bill Lambier played with the
okay.
Pistons.
There you go. Then that would be
Yeah.
my answer. So now I don't have a takeaway. Okay.
Adrian Dantley was, I think, also on that team. AD went to ND.
Yep.
Yeah. So I'm sure there are others.
Yeah.
We've definitely had women with
We
Bruce Brown
have had women, and but it's certainly been a
in the
long time.
NBA. Yeah. Yeah, great question. It might be fun to list all the former. There's got to be more than a few. I mean, maybe not a ton, but
Yeah, but
Notre
those were
Dame.
good. Good to pull those out off the top of your head.
Uh, I'll share it. But yeah, Monty Williams, there was a pretty long piece on him in Sports Illustrated. Had just an interesting life. Like, he has a heart issue,
hmm
had a pretty risky surgery, had to stop playing. Pretty hard to believe he went back and then it was okay. And then, as many people know, his wife Ingrid was killed in a car accident. They have several children. I had to put the article down when I read it. It was that hard to read. It was really beautiful, but it was tough. And a number of people in basketball really reached out to him. Kevin Durant was one of them, but I think when he was an assistant with the Thunder
hmm
and, wanted him to get back in when he could. But yeah, it's an incredible story of a resilient man who has honestly seen a lot. Yeah. So good luck to the Suns. And yeah, Pat Connaughton is the first cousin of my good friend, Aaron Bergen. So that's always kind of fun.
Yeah.
Following him all along. Her dad and his mom are siblings. And Pat's really tall and Aaron's not. So but yeah, it's just her kids have just obviously delighted in his career. And I don't know, on to Kupo. I don't say that he's hurt, so I don't know that
Giannis,
the
yeah.
Bucks will be.
Well, Baltimore's a big fan of Pat Connaughton, but they're hoping he doesn't do well because, he was drafted by the Orioles.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
And for a while, I don't know if he still is, for a while when he was playing for Portland, was still throwing and still training,
wow,
keeping his arm in shape. That was early in his basketball career.
yeah,
I think, basketball was, his first love. I think he was at the
yeah.
time a better baseball player, certainly from pitching than he was basketball player. But,
Do you
he,
think, or do you think it's because you can make more money in baseball because you can stay at it longer?
I think he is a better baseball player than he is basketball player. I think if he was doing it for the money, he would have gone to play for the Orioles. And boy, the way we're pitching right now, we could really use him. But I think that's why he kept
Yeah,
his arm in.
yeah. I
That's
don't
why.
know. I don't know that I don't know because
Oh,
he's played. If in terms of basketball, he was on the 2015 team that should have been in the Elite Eight.
yes, he
Yeah.
was, and they
I
should
mean,
have been. But I also think he, and I remember reading at the time, he said, basketball is my first love. I never knew if I'd
yeah.
have a
No, I
chance
get
to
that.
play. And the reason he was keeping his arm in shape initially was because he didn't know
Yeah,
how
yeah,
long his NBA career was going
yeah,
to last. And
yeah,
I would say, unlike some players, he has gotten exponentially better in the NBA. And I think he's had some
yeah,
coaches who have really worked with him and believed in him. And
yeah,
he's got such a great work ethic, and he's
Yeah.
really made the most of that opportunity. But I think at the time he didn't know how long it was going to last.
Yeah.
So I don't know if he
Yeah.
is still throwing, which is what they call, pitchers practicing, but probably not at this point. But I
I doubt
know,
it. I mean, he's getting a decent amount of minutes.
yeah,
I
I mean, he's
think he's
playing.
getting,
It's not like
yeah.
he's just warming the
Yeah.
bench.
Right.
So
Right.
it's fun to watch, those, and they were so fun to watch. That was probably one of my most fun teams to
Yeah.
watch
It was
at
a great team.
Notre
Yeah.
Dame. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Yep.
good luck to both of them. There's really, for
Yeah.
Notre Dame fans, no, loser in these series, but I will be cheering for the Suns.
That makes sense. Yeah, your
Yeah.
hometown team. That's cool. I know the networks hate it. They hate it, but oh well.
It is what it is. I know.
Yeah.
So
It's
moving
exciting,
on
I
to
think.
our spiritual stew, mine comes from this weekend's gospel, actually, the third. It was the Feast of St. Thomas the Apostle. It's always interesting to me. You hear about St. Thomas, but you also hear St. Thomas the Apostle. That's kind of his whole name.
Yeah.
And for
Right.
me, the local Catholic church near where I grew up, of course, I wasn't raised Catholic, so it's not where I went to church, was St. Thomas the Apostle. And I had friends who went to church at St. Thomas the Apostle. I had friends who went to school at St. Thomas the Apostle. And that was just something that was a name, and I was very familiar with growing up. And then, of course, when I moved back to Phoenix and was working and living there after I graduated from Notre Dame and went through the RCIA process, I went through that process at St. Thomas the Apostle Church. So that church it just has special meaning for me because of that. It was also the church that I used to go to daily mass with my grandfather. So
Oh
for
wow.
the 5 years that I was living in Arizona after
Huh.
graduation, before I got married, my grandfather was living with my parents, and most days, I would say, 5 days a week, 4 weeks a month, I would say at least 18 out of 20 of those daily masses, I would pick them up at 4:45. We would go to 5 o'clock daily mass. I'd drop them back off at my parents' house afterwards. Sometimes would stay for dinner, sometimes not. It was a
Yeah.
really special time for me to spend that time with him. Of course, he was Catholic. I, converted during that time. Having him there when I converted, being the only other Catholic in my family was so meaningful to me. I mean, this is age
Was.
like 91 to 96 for him. And then of course,
Wow.
my husband and I got married at St. Thomas the Apostle Church. So
Oh wow.
that church is definitely has special meaning for me. It's gone through some bumpy changes and kind of a rocky road over the past 20 years.
Okay.
So there's that part of our Catholic faith that we have to deal with as well. But the gospel reading
Always. Yeah.
on Saturday, is the doubting Thomas gospel, where he
Yeah.
is doubting and he is questioning. And, there is that line at the end that, so many of us have heard that I think about a lot, actually, more so than I realized. And then, read it and heard it. And, it just sticks with me. And that is, blessed are those who have not seen and have believed. And of course, in the
Yeah.
gospel, you're talking about, Thomas has seen the risen Christ, Jesus, and he is still doubting. And he's saying, you have seen and you are still don't believe. Blessed are those who have not seen and have believed. And you know what? That's millions of people.
Yeah.
And that's pretty amazing.
Yeah.
That
Yeah.
it puts in perspective how just the meaning of faith. Again, faith is, believing in something that you can't see or that you don't know for
Yeah.
sure. And so I love that gospel because, it is the Feast of St. Thomas the Apostle, but also just it's the foundation of our faith, believing in something that we haven't seen.
Yeah. I've always thought about that. Thanks for bringing up, that how it concludes, because it is something that we know through the Beatitudes and whatnot. But part of me has always wondered if it's actually harder to believe when you've seen, because you still have to like verify or determine, do I believe this is true? I mean, if Jesus is the Son of Man, he's God, like it's almost in some ways, I mean, it might be, you would have felt his effect or, been in his presence. So I don't want to underestimate what that must have been like, but also it's kind of like, you also have to come to grips with it. Like, okay, I've been part of this. Is that really, is he who he says he is?
Right, right. Or is it easier to believe in something maybe you don't really know for sure, but you're going to
Exactly,
believe it in
right?
anyway? Because,
You have enough evidence.
right. Well,
I
and
don't
then
know.
then it comes down to at some point we will have the second coming, and would we believe then? I mean,
Yeah. No. Right.
I don't know. I get the doubting Thomas, right?
Yeah.
Would I? Or is it or you're right, is it easier to believe in something that maybe we haven't seen?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
just something to
Well,
think about.
yeah. And when he does encounter the risen Christ and Jesus tells him to put, the his hands in his wounds and on his side, he says, "My Lord and my God." And I just think that is the most beautiful affirmation. I mean, we're supposed to say that during the consecration when the priest holds up the Eucharist. I always try to say that prayer, "My Lord and my God," and give St. Thomas the Apostle the credit. Yes, because I don't know, it seems like the apostle part is like a 50-50 if you get that one, right? Yeah.
Yes, at best.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's a good piece to chew on. Thank you, Haley. My piece for the spiritual stew is kind of corollary to last week when we talked about don't be afraid of surprise, and that to be a Christian is to constantly encounter surprise. That the history of God, salvation history, God reaching out to the on Sinai, or Yahweh, excuse me, or Christ's resurrection. But in this gospel on Sunday, Jesus was teaching in the Sabbath. And one of the quotes is, "When the Sabbath came, Jesus began to teach in the synagogue, and many who heard him were astonished." And, he's young. There must have been surprise or confusion. Like, how does this person from, Nazareth know and speak with such authority? So they were astonished. And it also ends with like a weird line. Like the gospel says he was surprised at their lack of faith, or, like it just kind of ends really suddenly, that theme in Mark's gospel. I don't know
Uh,
if you picked up on that.
Well, clearly that's a theme for Mark, because if you remember
Yeah.
last week when he
Yeah.
told them to
Yeah.
give somebody something to eat, I was like, "What?"
I know.
But that we Mark needed to take a historical writing class or something to.
Yeah, maybe he's a journalist. You know how they sometimes like news articles just kind of end. You're like, okay, they
Yes,
don't tie it up like we want them to. But I picked up the bulletin, so I don't know if you're a big bulletin person.
love
I
it.
definitely am.
Me too. I read it
So I
all.
was at Our Lady of Mercy because I play golf, and this church is very close to where I play golf, and they had a 4 o'clock, so I was like, perfect, because I knew Fourth of July would be tough to get to based on, the morning in Santa Cruz. But I started reading in the bulletin, and it speaks about the gospel. And the pastor writes the following. He says, "The biggest problem with such an attitude is not that we miss out on the truth or the facts, but that we miss out on the new and surprising gifts others can give us. Like the townspeople in today's gospel story, we too often refuse to allow others to display the talents that can be good news for us." So rather than, looking at this young person who's preaching the word of God with like, wow, and delight and surprise, there was skepticism and who is this? And I certainly would have been somebody in that crowd, and as opposed to like, let people show their gifts, let them express their talents, like give them the space to do that. I thought it was just a really helpful reminder for what we had talked about in light of last week.
Yeah, absolutely. I love when they connect like that.
Right?
Yeah.
I know. And then, the second reading is a good one. It's from St. Paul. It's a challenge, I think, as a Christian. It's, basically, when I am weak, I am strong. And it's used by a lot of non-denominational Christians, that passage. St. Paul has this goad in his side and a thorn that will always remind him that he's dependent on God. And, in our weakness, then the point is, when we are weak, we are almost like, we have to rely on Christ, right? Because we can't do it. And the first time I ever really kind of heard specifically a non-denominational Christian like really reference that line was I was able to interview this golfer, Casey Martin, who's very like devoted to his faith, and he used that line. He has like a leg disability, and it's kind of just guided his life. And I think it's really meaningful when you learn, when you meet another person that you respect, and then they have kind of a passage of scripture like that they let kind of be part of their own story. So I always think of Casey Martin when I hear that line, and anyone else who maybe has the courage to kind of, I don't know, live what that means. Because in my weakness, sometimes my reality isn't to depend totally on God. And I think there's always the invitation for that.
Absolutely. Well, and it's always, and I know you feel this way too, I always appreciate people being very comfortable and willing to share their faith in that way, right? Who are, they're not ashamed to. Now, it's kind of, for lack of a better term, bit some of them in the butt and not really been, career ending. But I think there is a way to do it that is true to themselves and who they are, but also in a way that's, not offensive to people for whom, their faith is not as, important or strong. But I do always love when you are hearing someone speak publicly and that when they mention their faith, that it is genuine and authentic. There's just something pretty beautiful and powerful in that.
Yes.
Yeah.
I totally agree with that, because that's really kind of the story of how I came to interview him. Is I did hear him speak about his faith, and I was like, wow, you're speaking about that in a way that other people aren't. And it was because of like you said, the authenticity of it. So
Anne, that's my takeaway for the week from the Melting Pot. I am going to make sure that in any dealings that I have, and I'm sure there's times you kind of bite your tongue and don't bring up your faith. I certainly do. I bite my tongue. I'd like to think that I bring it up sometimes, but you kind of know your audience when you can and when you can't. But I'm going to do more can than can'ts and make sure that it's done in a way that is genuine and authentic and not offensive to other people. I think that I think that's who I want to try to be. Someone who, if I'm thinking it, if I'm feeling it, I should be able to say it and not bite my tongue, but make sure that I say it in a way that is authentic to myself, but respectful to whoever's listening to me. So that is my takeaway for this week.
Okay. That's a tall
order.
It's a
hefty one. I know.
I mean, every time I've heard you speak, Haley, I think that is precisely what you do. I think that's why your message has such staying power. Because, like, for example, you talk about, it was really the community of faith around me that is part of why I became Catholic. The prayers of others, Father Malloy, can I pray with you? I'm not Catholic, doesn't matter. Like, those are the things that, I don't know, anybody who hears your formal message. So I guess my question is, are you talking about in your day-to-day life then?
Yes, definitely my day-to-day life. Right, because I'm thinking, of course, you would think I sounded authentic because I'm speaking, to someone who's receptive to it.
Yeah.
The key is to do it in other settings.
Yeah. Well, I guess like one of my questions would be like, so how are we helping in terms of our takeaways? This will be something I'll think about. How are we helping people who are struggling with their faith? Who quite honestly might not have faith.
Right. Whether they're a doubting Thomas or whether they're in a place where they are so weak they don't have that strong faith to balance that out.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, I had a conversation with a friend of mine who's a Jesuit this week, and we were talking, like I was talking to him, we were talking about our prayer lives, and I was like, wow, what a grace to be able to like really talk about that with someone. And he just said, it's just been so rich. And I said, what do you mean by that? And he said, I just have a very strong understanding that God has been with me. God is beside me in this. And he's able to look at his life, like, and see that that's been, like, literally see that that's been true. What did we say? Blessed are those who have not seen, but.
Right. And he can see it and he still believes, which might be harder. Right.
Right. So,
well, those are good takeaways, as we move through this 14th week of ordinary time. seems a little ordinary right now. We're moving out of a
It kinda
holiday
does.
weekend.
Yeah.
We're just
I
kind of,
know.
again,
Coming
with
down.
both of us working in education, it's just kind of a,
Yeah.
slow and steady path with some time off
Yeah.
here and there. So
So
enjoy
nice.
that. But it's always great to have this
Yeah.
conversation. It's always regrounding for me. I hope it is for others to just think about things in a different way, think about the regular world in a different way, and hopefully be able to speak about and share our faith in an authentic way.
Yeah. And invite our listeners, if they ever have questions or comments, maybe responses to what we have shared on the air, that would be great to include it in future podcasts. So
Yeah.
thank you, listeners.
Absolutely. Let us know.
Yeah.
We'll talk to you again next week. Thanks, Anne.
Have a great week.